What's up my friends, welcome back to the channel. So that title, "There's no perfect mojito," is not entirely true. It actually does exist. Only if you make it for you. Because let's face it, if you make a mojito for someone else, there's a 99% chance you will get criticized for your method. Like, you didn't muddle the mint. You should never muddle the mint. Why haven't you used sugar instead of syrup? Oh man, I hate granulated sugar in my mojito. Bro, that's not the right mint. You should use yerba buena. Whoa, did you just shake your mojito? You're going straight to mojito hell, man. What's that? Is it your first day bartending? That's really not how to do it in Cuba. It never ends. But despite all the debates and strong opinions about the mojito, I'm part of the camp that believe that there are several different ways to make great drink, no matter what hot controversial technique you use. For me, it's all a matter of how you apply this method to make the perfect mojito for you. So my friends, today we're gonna talk about some of the best practices I've learned over the years. So if you guys are ready, let's make some mojitos. Let's go. Alright, so like I said, I believe there are many different ways to make a great mojito, and if you think otherwise, well, maybe you're doing something wrong or applying some techniques the wrong way. Or maybe you're also suffering from what we call the classicism, which means that only because something is not classic, you believe it's wrong. Well, I believe this is what's wrong, and we're not even gonna consider that today. We're gonna concentrate on the most controversial topics, the most controversial techniques when making a mojito, and we're gonna talk about how we can turn those bad techniques into something good when applied to a mojito. Then we're gonna make several different versions of the mojito with a mix of these controversial techniques to prove my point. But before we jump into the recipes, let's talk about 5 of the most controversial things about the mojito, and let's start with the mint. I believe there's not one single video on the whole internet about a mojito that doesn't have at least one comment saying something like, "You should be using yerba buena, this is not the right type of mint." Something like that. And I really don't understand that one, because yerba buena is literally the Spanish word for mint. But because there are so many comments like that, I myself received a lot of those. It caught my attention and I decided to dig a little bit further. What I understood is that mostly in Latin America, yerba buena is a term to separate the spearmint from the peppermint, the yerba buena being the mellower type of mint, so the spearmint. And that is actually true. If you're not using spearmint for your mojitos, chances are you're gonna make something that's a little bit off, especially if you're using peppermint. That's really not a good choice for a mojito. Pineapple mint could be good, chocolate mint, why not? But the best one is most definitely the spearmint, apparently also called yerba buena in some countries. Then there's the strong debate whether or not you should be using the stem of the mint sprig or only the leaves. Personally, I believe you should be only using the leaves, because the stem for me doesn't add anything. It doesn't have really some mint flavor into it, like in contrary, like the basil stem really is packed with some basil flavor, so you could totally use that in a cocktail that requires some fresh basil. But for the mint, it's totally different. Just give it a shot, try it, just chew a little bit on a mint stem and you will not pick up a lot of flavors. On the other hand, it can develop some bitterness when muddled, or also some strong vegetal flavors, which would take us away from the bright, crisp mint flavor. So if you are muddling your mojitos, this is when you should really be considering using only the leaves rather than the whole sprig of the mint. But if you don't muddle your mojito, which is another controversial topic that we're gonna talk about later, then you can totally use the whole sprig of the mint, but in my opinion, it doesn't add flavors and it certainly doesn't look that good, but at this point, it's just a matter of choice. Second, we're gonna talk about the choice of sweetener. what type of sugar should you be using, and should you be using it in its granulated form or in syrup? Like I said, I believe both can be used in a mojito, but it's gonna affect the flavor of it, and also it's gonna affect the technique you should be using depending on what choice you're making. First of all, the type of sugar. If you're using raw cane sugar, turbinado, demerara, or refined sugar, it's gonna affect the flavor because all these sugars are completely different in taste. The more refined the sugar, the less flavor you're gonna get from it. Mostly what you're gonna get from a refined sugar is its sweetness, while a demerara or a turbinado sugar still has some molasses in there, so you're gonna get more body, more raw flavor out of it as well from its sweetness. But it doesn't mean that one is better than the other. The only thing it means is it's gonna change the flavor of your mojito. So if you want a mojito that tastes like rum, lime, and mint, and you don't want the molasses flavor in there, use a refined sugar. But if you want that body from the molasses, or if you're using an aged rum and you want your sugar to taste next to your flavorful rum, then use a sugar that is less refined, that still has some molasses in there, and it's gonna hold up to the bold flavor of your cocktail. It's only gonna be better. But again, it's all a matter of preferences or choices. One important thing to remember when using sugar in its granulated form when making a mojito is you're gonna have to impart some efforts, some elbow grease to dissolve the sugar. So what I like to do, especially when using a less refined sugar, which usually comes in a coarser grain, is to flash blend it just a couple of seconds in the blender. That way it's gonna become super fine and super easy to dissolve. Also, when using granulated sugar, it's gonna act as a solvent to extract easily the natural oils from the mint, which will result in a mojito with a bolder flavor of the herb. The third most controversial topic when it comes to mojitos is whether or not you should muddle your lime. I believe there's two reasons why people are very passionate about the fact we should whether or not muddle our limes. The first one being, if you muddle your lime rather than juicing it, you will extract some of the lime oils, which is very tasty in a cocktail, but also, and that's a downside, it's gonna be hard to measure the quantity of lime juice you gotta impart in your cocktail. So if you measure your sugar but you don't measure your lime juice, that's really hard to make a consistent cocktail. So for me, it's also something that I usually stay away from, but there's still some ways to make it tasty and balanced, and we're gonna talk about that in a couple of minutes again. On the other hand, there's also a lot of people that believe that if you muddle your limes, that means that you will muddle your mint, probably, and that's gonna ruin the whole mojito because you're gonna develop some bitterness from over muddling or manipulating the mint. You're gonna shred the mint because of the muddling. But honestly, over the years, I've made my mojitos in several different ways, and I had muddled my limes on top of my mint, and I never picked up any bitterness. That also brings us back to the mint choice. If you're using only the leaves and you place them in the bottom of your glass, place the limes over that and use the limes to create a cushion between your muddler and the leaves, there's no way you're gonna develop any bitterness, and it's also gonna prevent you from over manipulating the leaves. It's not gonna shred, it's not gonna develop some vegetal notes into the cocktail. So really, if you want to muddle your limes to extract the juice because that's how you want to do it, well, there's a way you can make still a great mojito. But that still leaves us with the inconsistency problem. So for me, that's the biggest problem because yes, when muddling the lime, it's really hard to know how much juice you extracted. But if you still want to have the oils from the lime, there's a little trick, and I like usually to juice my lime and then just add a couple of piece of lime husks over the mint, and then I blend everything together so I get best of both worlds, the consistency and the oils from the lime without muddling with a precise amount of juice to balance my precise amount of sugar. Now, before we jump onto the fourth point, there's a little thing I would like to discuss about the lime oils. Lime oils are very intense in flavors. They're really pungent and they can have that little bittering flavor. So people that believe that that muddling mint can cause bitterness is probably because they kind of really pushed hard on their limes and they extracted a whole lot of lime oils, and that's what would probably cause bitterness. And not only it can be a little bit bitter, it can also cause a little bit of numbness on the tongue, a lingering numb feeling on the tongue with a slight bitter taste. So if you are sensitive to that, well then you should just stay away from the muddling at all. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, the probably most controversial topic when it comes to mojitos, whether or not you should shake them. So like I just mentioned it, I believe there's no real way you can extract bitterness from mint leaves only. And I believe that's the reason why people are so afraid of shaking a mojito. And there's a couple of things that will prove them wrong here. First of all, there's a cocktail called the Aku Aku, which is a blended classic drink with a whole bunch of blended mint in there. And it's not bitter at all. It's just a whole punch in your face of mint flavors, and it's super bright, super crisp, super refreshing, and extremely tasty. So if that doesn't extract any bitterness from the mint leaves, there's no way shaking a couple of mint leaves will extract some bitterness. That being said, it will shred the mint leaves, so from an aesthetic standpoint, it's not the best move, but flavor-wise, it shouldn't cause any problems. There's also some ways to reduce the negative aesthetic impact from the shaken mint, and one of them is to use crushed ice instead of cubed ice, and the other one is simply to fine strain your cocktail if that's the road you want to take. Lastly, about this topic, I believe a lot of people shaking their mojitos are doing so because they want to extract as much mint flavors as possible. But I came to the conclusion that it's actually not the best practice to extract as much mint flavors as possible in your mojito. That's actually by building it with some granulated sugar and stirring the mint with the sugar to make some kind of a mint oleo saccharum. That way, it's kind of counterintuitive, but it makes for a much more minty mojito. Now lastly, before we jump into the recipes, let's talk about the ice choice, because even though it's not as controversial as the other ones, it's quite important. I believe when shaking your mojito with the mint, you should totally use crushed ice to avoid over shredding the mint, and it's gonna extract just the flavor that you want. But for the cocktail itself, you should pour it over cubed ice, because shaking the cocktail will already provide a lot of dilution, and pouring it over crushed ice on top of that will just make a cocktail that might be a little dull and watered down too fast. On the other hand, if you're building the cocktail right into the glass with the mint, the sugar, and all that good stuff, I highly recommend you use crushed ice for several different reasons, but the main one would be to be able to reach a very cold temperature super fast that you would have a hard time reaching with cubed ice. Also, when using granulated sugar when making your mojitos, you will get a lot of sugar stuck on your bar spoon, and using crushed ice will just make it super easy to make sure all the sugar stays in your cocktail. So I think this wraps things up for our controversial topics and why choose one technique over the other. So now let's put all that to test in some delicious mojitos, and make sure to stay till the end if you want to know what is my favorite way to make the drink. Alright, so let's start with one of the most controversial of them all. We're gonna muddle the limes, and we're gonna use a simple syrup instead of sugar, but I guarantee there's a way to make that one good. First, in our glass, we're gonna add about 10 mint leaves, and I always like to smack them a little bit just to release the oils, even though it's not necessary. It's kind of force of habits, but I like to do it anyways. Then we're gonna add 3/4 of an ounce of simple syrup. We're gonna slice a lime in two, and then make quarters with each half. And then we're gonna place 5 or 6 pieces of lime on top of the mint. Then using a muddler, we're gonna press on the lime to extract the juice. It's also gonna express a little bit of the oils from the lime. And once you feel you were able to extract most of the juice from the lime pieces, you're gonna add 2 ounces of light rum. You're gonna fill it almost all the way up with crushed ice, and using your bar spoon, you're gonna churn a little bit to mix things up, to incorporate all the ingredients together, to chill and dilute. Then you're gonna add about 1.5 ounces, maximum 2 ounces of sparkling water. Garnish with a generous mint bouquet. And my little pro tip with this version is, because we were not able to measure the amount of lime juice we added to the cocktail, I always like to add 1 piece of lime also as a garnish, so you can juice it if you want to balance the cocktail furthermore if you feel it's not tart enough. I feel like this version of the mojito usually ends up into something that's a little less acidic, which can be a plus for a lot of people, because not everyone everyone likes a tart drink. So if you prefer your cocktail a little less on the tart side, you will love this version of it. Plus, by adding a little piece of lime next to the mint sprig, it just allows you to balance the cocktail to your likings. Like I said before though, when using simple syrup instead of granulated sugar, it usually yields a cocktail that's less minty. Even though we muddled the lime with the mint underneath, it's not extracting as much mint flavors as when you're using granulated sugar. So if you prefer your mojito less acidic with some lime oils and more mint flavors, I recommend you use granulated sugar, and here's how you can do it. So we're gonna do the exact same thing. We're gonna start in an eyeball glass with about 10 mint leaves, and then we're gonna add 1 tablespoon of the granulated sugar of your choice. Then using a bar spoon, you're gonna stir the mint with the sugar, and after about 30 seconds, you will start realizing that the sugar starts to be humid. That means that the oils from the mint are starting to be extracted, and after about 1 minute doing so, it should be enough. But if you're not sure, if it smells mint all around the place, it's your cue to go to the next step. So here, what I like to do is to add right away my rum. So we're gonna do 2 ounces of it. That's gonna allow us to rinse our bar spoon and make sure all the sugar will be in the cocktail. Then with the bar spoon, we're gonna tap the mint a little bit to make sure it's at the bottom of the glass. And then we're gonna repeat the same step with the lime. We're gonna cut it in half, each half in 4. And we're gonna add about 5 pieces, maybe 6 in the bottom of our glass. And using a muddler, we're gonna press on the limes to extract its juice. Then we're gonna fill the glass almost all the way up with crushed ice. Churn a little bit for the same thing to incorporate all the ingredients together to chill and dilute. Add about 1.5 ounces up to 2 ounces of sparkling water. Top it with more crushed ice if necessary. Garnish with the mint bouquet, and again a little piece of lime if you feel like adjusting the balance of the drink. In this one, we're still a bit mellow on the acidity, but we have a much more intense mint flavor. I believe it is a great way to make a cocktail. So now let's make what I believe is the fastest way to make a delicious mojito. It's the first shaken one from the series, so I can't wait to see the comments on it, but believe me, it is a great one. So first, in a shaker, we're gonna add 10 mint leaves, 2 ounces of light white rum, then we're gonna add 1 ounce of freshly squeezed lime juice. And for those of you who like a little kick of lime oil for extra flavors, just cut the lime husk in a couple of pieces and throw 1 or 2 in the shaker. Then this is totally up to you. You can add 3/4 of an ounce of simple syrup or 1 tablespoon of super fine sugar. Then you're gonna add 1 small scoop of crushed ice, shake it briefly, open pour everything in a Collins glass, add more crushed ice if necessary, top it with about 1 ounce of sparkling water, and garnish with a generous mint bouquet. This mojito is definitely great if you're planning on making a lot of them because it's really fast to make. The fact that we shook the cocktail with crushed ice instead of cubed ice was just enough to extract beautiful mint flavors, but it didn't shred the leaves in tiny little pieces that are really annoying when you're drinking the cocktail. So overall, this is a delicious drink, packed with mint flavors, super refreshing, really fast to make, no bitterness even though we shook the drink, so I think it is a great version, especially if you're working in a high volume bar or if you're throwing a mojito party. You will love this method. Now we only have one left to make before my favorite version of the mojito, and it's one for those of you who still, after all this, don't want to shake your mint but still want to make it pretty fast. So we're gonna start in a shaker with, again, 2 ounces of light white rum, 1 ounce of fresh lime juice. Like in the previous one, you can also add in this one a little piece of lime husk if you like the lime oils. And then we're gonna add 3/4 of an ounce of simple syrup or super fine sugar. Then in our glass, before shaking the cocktail, we're gonna add our mint, again about 10 leaves. And then with a muddler, we're simply gonna lightly tap on the mint leaves. It's gonna do what we call waking the mint, and just that should be enough to add beautiful mint flavors to your cocktail without bruising the mint, without muddling anything, or without a long process of stirring the mint with the sugar. Then we're gonna fill our shaker with ice and shake it for about 5 to 10 seconds just to chill and dilute. We're gonna fill our glass with cubed ice, add 1 ounce of sparkling water, and double strain our cocktail over it. Because the cocktail is heavier than the sparkling water, it's gonna mix all together without having to do anything else. Then if you need, you can add just a little bit more of sparkling water and give it a quick stir if necessary, and garnish this with a beautiful and generous mint bouquet. That version is surprisingly minty, even though all we did was to tap just a a little bit on the mint leaves with a muddler. That was enough to extract beautiful flavors. Also, we served this cocktail over cubed ice instead of crushed ice because we shook the cocktail normally, so we already had the perfect temperature. We added quite a lot of dilution with the shaking process, so we didn't need the advantages of the crushed ice to lower the temperature really fast and to add a little extra dilution. It would not serve the cocktail properly. So by using the beautiful big cubes of ice, we slow a little bit the dilution, we keep the temperature, and I think it's pretty, no pun intended, aesthetically pleasing because the mint leaves are still perfect. The big cubes makes it kind of modern and I really like it. And taste-wise, this cocktail is spot on. Now, if you ask me, if you want to know what is my favorite version of the mojito, that's what we're gonna do right away for the last mojito of the day. All right, so let's make it. In our glass, we're gonna add about 10 mint leaves, 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar, and with a bar spoon, we're gonna do the stirring thing until we get a beautiful mint sugar. Then we're gonna juice our lime, save 1 ounce of the juice, add that to the cocktail, cut the husk in small pieces, and add about 3 to 4 of them in the cocktail for extra flavor. Then we're gonna add our 2 ounces of rum. Then we're gonna fill the glass almost all the way up with crushed ice. Churn a couple of seconds to mix, chill, and dilute. Add 1.5 ounces of sparkling water. Top it with more crushed ice and a beautiful and generous mint bouquet. For me, this one is hands down the tastiest of them all. It is packed with a lot of beautiful mint flavor. We get a perfect balance of acidity and sweetness because we measured both ingredients perfectly, but we still extra flavor from the lime because we added some juiced lime husks that provided some lime oils. It is extremely refreshing, super cold, perfectly balanced, and I really like the look of it. Now, I'm sure there was a whole lot of other different possibilities we could have tested, but I believe the ones we've made will cover the most critical points to discuss when it comes to mojitos, and I hope this video will help you change your mind that it's possible to make a mojito in many different ways and still make a great cocktail. And if that video didn't help you change your mind and you still believe there's only one way to make a good mojito, well, you're probably a lost cause, and I'm sorry. So my friends, this is it for me today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked this video. Leave a thumbs up if you did. Don't forget to subscribe before we go. Turn that bell if you want to make sure not to miss the next one. And until then, thank you very much. Have a great day and see you very soon. Cheers. Stop what you're doing right now. That's not how to make it in Cuba. You should never muddle your lime. No. Just shake your mojito? You're going straight to mojito hell, man. Why haven't you used sugar instead of simple syrup?